and welcome and welcome to the Sunday matinee. All of you watching are probably confused as to why I am talking right now and not Ben Stahl. That is because he has asked me to host this episode, the first guest host of the Sunday matinee. Basically I came to him with the idea for this episode, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, that would be great. Do you want to host it?" So I'm hosting today. So it'll be an interesting experience for all of us. I have been on this show as a guest many times. My name is Sarah Moore. And then our other two panelists today are, of course, Ben Stahl, who you all know.
Hi, everybody.
And our other panelist today is Dustin Moore, who also happens to be my husband, but today we are just co-panelists. So
thank you, fellow co-panelists.
All right. Okay, so that was the panelists, and Ben also wanted me to mention that next week there will not be a Sunday matinee recorded next weekend. And then the week after that, he is planning to do a Moon Knight spoiler cast episode, which I would love to be on, but I probably am not going to finish the series by then, unfortunately. But I'm looking forward to watching it because it sounds really good so far. We just got cut off on Hawkeye, so we're getting there. All right. I don't know. Were there any other upcoming episodes that we wanted to talk about, or just the next one, Ben?
I really just want to let everyone know that next week
Gotcha. Okay.
I'll be gone. And just to throw this in there too, any upcoming episode may still be put on the back burner once I get my special guest for the Severance episode.
That's right.
So that could happen anytime. So any future episodes might get bumped. And yeah, once again, if you have Apple TV, watch Severance. It's so good.
Ben knows the Dustin, just Ben knows the writer of Severance, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh.
So, and apparently I've heard really good things, not just from Ben, from like social media and all the people I know who've seen it. So apparently it's a show to check out.
We'll definitely take that recommendation.
All right, so we are on to news, and I put an item on here for the Thor trailer dropping, which Ben did mention he did talk about in the last episode, but he wanted to hear our reactions to the Thor trailer. So, Dustin just watched the Thor trailer. What did you think?
Well, it definitely warmed my elder millennial heart. Definitely hit me right in the feels with the Guns N' Roses music playing, and it looks like a lot of fun. Actually, I really enjoyed Ragnarok and kind of the fun and feel and direction that they went with Thor, and this looks kind of like a mixture of some of that and something new. And so it looks like fun to me.
Yeah, I definitely felt like, I kind of have a soft spot for teaser trailers more than like the theatrical trailers. Because sometimes I feel like the theatrical trailers show like a little bit too much. I really kind of love teaser trailers. So yeah, I thought it was just kind of fun how they showed kind of little glimpses of a lot of fun stuff. Love the Guardians in there. I definitely like Thor on his journey of self-discovery. I think that will be really fun. I know we talked in the Loki spoiler cast about being happy that Thor and Loki are going in their own directions. And I feel a little bit sad to not have Loki in the new Thor movie, but I think it will be okay. It will still be enjoyable. Super, super pumped to see the whole Jane Foster as Thor thing. That will be fun. So, and man, she had like a rocking bicep there too.
Yes, she does.
In that final shot. So way to go now. All right. The next item I put on here, I just thought was something kind of fun, especially since we talked about Lord of the Rings the last episode I was on. Apparently Andy Serkis has is now heading a production of Animal Farm based on the book. I believe it's for Netflix. So I was not aware that this is something he's been trying to make for a long time, apparently. They didn't say a lot about it other than he kind of got the green light to start doing it. So I don't, but it sounded interesting. What are your thoughts about that?
I'm just looking it up right now, and it says it's going to be an animated adaptation. I'm wondering if it's going to be
so
CG and involving a lot of motion capture.
Characters? That's what I want.
Yeah,
that, I mean,
he is the motion capture king after all. So that would stand to reason that they're going to act out the animated animal parts, but that would be fun to see.
It sounded too, just from the little blurb I read, that he says it's going to be more family friendly. He's taking more of a family friendly tone with it. So that'll be interesting to see if it can be family friendly and still kind of embrace the themes inherent in that story. So
I just hope that he's able to find an audience for this one, because the last sort of big film he directed was his own adaptation of the Jungle Book, which unfortunately released right after I think it was Jon Favreau who directed the Disney adaptation, the sort of live action remake. So it kind of got lost.
Oh wow, I didn't even know he did the Jungle Book.
Yep.
Yeah.
I got lost there in the mix, as often happens when, two studios do that, when they make like the same film, and one will inevitably get lost and forgotten.
Yeah, and Andy probably doesn't have quite the budget that Disney does to promote their film, so not really surprising.
Yeah, and so anyway, so that'll be an interesting. I think it said it was coming to Netflix. So, and speaking of Netflix has been in the news quite a bit lately with lots of drama, which I know Dustin and I have been talking about, because I don't know, it's a funny situation that they're really pushing this. We're losing subscribers because people are sharing passwords. I don't know.
I don't think that's the case. I don't buy that either. Honestly, just, since starting up doing this, I've had to subscribe to streaming services to watch stuff like Severance, HBO Max last year for all the movies. And I've learned that HBO Max has some really good original content on there, stuff that kind of blows most of the Netflix stuff out of the water. And same with Apple TV now with, I haven't even watched Ted Lasso, but that's something that I've heard everyone likes. And I feel like apart from like Stranger Things and stuff like Bridgerton, we don't talk about Netflix shows anymore. And Netflix just keeps dropping new content that no one cares about.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of The Witcher. And I was a big fan of Stranger Things. It kind of lost me in season 3. I don't know. Really, I think our daughter watches more Netflix than we do. It's got some great kid shows on it. That's not, I haven't a lot of time to like look through it. But I too, I feel like I've been watching more things on Disney Plus and HBO Max lately. Yeah.
I will give Netflix credit though here. Their featured films have been getting steadily better. The Power of the Dog was a really good one, and Tick Tick Boom was really good. But their general television content, it's such a mixed bag at this point that they really are depending on stuff like Stranger Things and Bridgerton, just the big stuff, to really carry them through. While the rest of the stuff, I mean, apparently they're cutting out a lot of just their animated works, period. So that's rough.
Well, and that's okay. I mean, like, it's okay to have like a few kind of tentpole thing. I mean, that I would say that's the case with some other streaming services too, but Netflix is by far the most expensive. Like, I mean, yeah, like, what's it, like $20 a month now for like the basic kind of lower end? I can't remember, but like not even getting like the HD and not having like multiple like because basically you pay. I mean, that's the funny thing about them with the sharing passwords. It's like we have pay for like 5 people to access our account. So, like kids can have their own profile and stuff. So it's like, I don't know. I when I first saw that like a few months ago, because I know it was in the news like a little while ago that they were gonna look at a few countries in South America to do like a I don't know, look at what they could do to stop people from password sharing. But now all of a sudden it's like this big thing in the news again. And I think they're barking up the wrong tree.
I looked it up, and you can still get one screen for $9.99 and no HD.
Oh, okay.
But the stuff
that's no more expensive than Disney Plus, and like it's more expensive than Disney Plus, and you can have, and basically like you can have as many profiles, or I guess maybe not as many, but we have 6 profiles on Disney Plus for us and the 4 kids, and like it didn't cost extra. And I think HBO Max, I mean, it's like 15, but I mean, they have some pretty amazing content on there. And I think also they don't make you pay for like extra accounts or extra like profiles, I guess. So.
Yeah, I've got 3 profiles on HBO and 4 on Disney. And it's like, yeah, I'm still paying base price for both of those. So.
Yeah, and I know like I've been watching something on my phone, and or my daughter's watching something. So you can watch them like at the same time too on different profiles. So I don't know. No, I've been with Netflix since 2005 when they were shipping like DVDs. Yep. Which was pretty amazing at the time. So I mean, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to see their journey has been interesting.
And they apparently still do that.
They do. We had like, my mom had like a DVD account. I think she finally canceled it a couple of years ago because she would take DVDs up to like watch with my grandma because they didn't have like internet. So
I still remember getting those, first discs in the mail and then the little sleeve and just being like, oh, this is so much easier than going to Blockbuster. Although I do have that nostalgia for, going and browsing and, the smell and the new releases and kind of the ritual, right, around renting movies when we were growing up versus the ritual now is completely different. But yeah, I mean, Netflix could be credited with changing the industry, but they're not the leader anymore, and they need to realize they have some stiff competition.
Yeah, I saw some really good shows back when I did the DVD Netflix. I think that was how I saw like Deadwood. That was how I saw Arrested Development. Like I definitely saw some. So I have a lot of nostalgia for old Netflix, but they're definitely, I don't know. They're being a little dramatic right now. And then any other thoughts on the Netflix?
Only in general. I am looking forward to the day, maybe 10, 15 years from now, when film and television go through that same renaissance that music has been going through the past few years of, oh my gosh, it's a video store where you go buy movies on a disc and you put them into a machine. What is this?
The vinyl scenes really made a comeback, and and we've seen good collector stores popping up. We definitely need to do that for movies.
Here's hoping.
Yep.
Here's hoping. All right, and then the last item I put on the news, something Ben actually pointed out to me, is that M. Night Shyamalan has begun filming a new film called Knock at the Cabin, which sounds like it's some type of horror film. Let me look at my picture here really quick.
Yes, Ben, do tell. What are the details here?
Oh gosh, I wish I still had them up on my phone.
Okay, so it's starring Dave Bautista.
Ooh,
interesting. Of course, there's not a lot of details about plot or characters. It's set to release February 3rd, 2023. Currently against no big competition, but it will be opening in the same month as the Captain Marvel sequel. Says it also stars Rupert Grint from the Harry Potter movies.
Ooh.
That's pretty interesting. Avenue 5-star Nikki Amuka Bird. I don't know her. Jonathan Groff, who I believe is from like Hamilton and Frozen.
Yep.
And Ben Aldridge from Fleabag, which is a show I have not watched, but I've heard good things. And it's the latest collaboration with him in the studio who he's worked with for Glass, Split, and The Visit. Now, I have had an interesting relationship with Mr. Shyamalan because I actually really loved his movies. I really loved them up through The Village, even. And then they started to go a little downhill for me at Lady in the Water. But then I did really enjoy The Visit. Split was okay. I have not seen Glass because I didn't hear good things about it. But I always kind of hold out hope that he's gonna have another renaissance. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I remember you wrote a review of The Visit.
I did.
When we were still just a blog.
For the online Sunday matinee.
Yeah. I missed almost all of his films between The Village and whatever he did right before Split. I went and saw Split and I was delighted by that. And then I was really excited for Glass. And I froze, didn't I?
You did freeze.
Okay. Well, as long as you can still hear me.
I can still hear you. You're back.
Glass was a massive letdown for me, so I kind of have dropped off the Shyamalan scene again, even though Old looked interesting. But if he's going to go kind of do like a traditional horror movie, I'm all in on that.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an open mind. What do you think, Dustin?
I agree. I think he's one of those directors where I really just try to moderate my anticipation, right? Like he's just like where like I've gone into some of his movies, where, and I mean, I remember seeing Unbreakable in the theater and just, I wasn't prepared for that movie. And it just really blew my mind and made me think differently about how cinema could be and how you could tell like our superhero story a different way. And yet I've walked into some of his movies and just been like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? And so I have hope. I am going to reserve judgment until it's out in cinemas.
Yeah.
Although I am curious to see Rupert on screen again. It's interesting to see him coming back to the screen after taking such a break. I mean, really in what I would call, big films, right? I know he's done some small projects, but
yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm curious. I guess the Cabin definitely catches me because I definitely have an affinity for the Cabin horror movies, like the Cabin Woods related.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. All right. So now we're on to the what have you been watching segment. So Ben, I'll start with you. What have you been watching?
Well, I of course have been keeping up on Moon Knight. That's essential right now for me. But I won't say anything because I know you're behind, and I know there are people out there who are probably behind. But I'll just say this: if it sticks to landing, it's going to be good. On Friday, I got to go see The Northman, which is excellent. It is Robert Eggers' third film. Anyone who's been following the show for a while already knows I'm a huge fan of The Lighthouse. So this was you'd think it'd be much more of a sort of traditional story since it's Vikings, but it definitely still has that supernatural sensibility about it. And yeah, if you are the type of person out there who is really craving original content from Hollywood, who's tired of just seeing Marvel movies, and if you can stomach the Game of Thrones style violence, and you like Shakespeare, then The Northman is definitely the movie for you. And then just last night, I watched The Batman on HBO Max. Saw it in the theaters, second time seeing it. I'd say it's slowly eking its way up to possibly taking the place of The Dark Knight as my favorite Batman movie. If the sequel is any good, then it probably will, because I currently love the new universe they've created for Batman. I think it's great. That's what I've been watching.
Nice. Definitely gotta find 3 hours to check out the Batman, because I've heard pretty glowing reviews from everybody. So
yeah, my eldest daughter went and saw it in the theaters, and she was raving about it. She was like, "Dad, you've got to see the Batman." And of course, Sarah and I have a toddler at the moment, so 3 hours is hard to locate, but we'll find it.
Yeah. Dustin, what have you been watching?
Do toddler shows count? No, I'm just kidding.
I think I've mentioned them before. I think I mentioned Encanto one week. No.
I think out of the things I've watched, I was actually pleasantly surprised with Hawkeye, and I know we're really behind the times on that since it was like Christmas, but it was fun to get caught up and to kind of get back into the universe again. And we're going to jump into Moon Knight here next, and I'm excited about that. I continue to be really impressed with Marvel Studios. I mean, yes, it's very much what you're going to get, and Ben, it's nice to have some variety out there with the Northman. But it's like, I don't go into Marvel shows with the same moderation of expectations as M. Night, right? I feel like, okay, I can count on this to at least be entertaining, if not mind-blowing. And Hawkeye was a lot of fun, introducing new characters, creating the new dynamic. And The Witcher was the other one we just finished. And again, a little behind, sorry, audience, but again, just a really good use of a universe that is really interesting and fun, and the way that they're taking that show has been fun to follow. But yeah, that's what I've been watching.
You're good. I don't think we've talked a lot about The Witcher, at least not on any of the episodes I've been on. So
that's because I haven't watched it yet.
It's very fun. It has a very it's like a good mix between kind of a 90s fantasy vibe and the Game of Thronesy fantasy vibe. So it kind of walks a thin line between them, and it's real. And Henry Cavill just hits the right note. He was the perfect person to lead that show. So
yeah. If you're ever laid up and you need something to binge, Ben, I highly recommend it. It's a fun show.
I'm pretty sure it's in my queue, and I do want to watch it because I'm immersed in video game culture as well, even though I also haven't played the games. But I also do want to watch something with Henry Cavill where I'm not constantly just cringing because
they've CG'd his mustache out or something.
I don't object to the idea of him as Superman, but he has not been in a good Superman movie yet.
I mean, just too bad, because I think he is good casting for Superman. Yep. I hope he gets a good. I think he's definitely an underrated actor. He was at another movie I strangely really enjoyed him in was the movie Enola Holmes that was on Netflix. I don't know if it's kind of more of a YA type movie, but but he plays Sherlock Holmes in it because it's about his little sister, and that was another. I was just like, he just was more enjoyable than I expected in it. So
that's getting a sequel.
Yeah. It was cute. It was a cute show. I'll probably watch a sequel at some point. What I've been watching, well, Dustin talked about some of the things we've been watching, but I additionally have also recently watched the show The Gilded Age that's on HBO Max. I'm a huge Downton Abbey fan. I haven't gone into Bridgerton because I don't know. I my heart's with Downton Abbey for period piece shows. But I really enjoyed The Gilded Age. I thought it was it takes place like in the late 1800s in New York, so it's more like old money versus new money. Whereas Downton Abbey was more like the land, like the landed titled people versus the working class, and how that changes through like World War One. But yeah, they're very good. Like, and it's probably the most wholesome show I've ever watched on HBO Max. Like there was very, very little nudity in it, and not really any violence, which is very shocking for HBO Max. But I just really like how his shows, I don't know, the characters are all just very like real, but likable. And even the people you kind of want to hate, sometimes you can't help but like. And then there's a few that you usually really don't like, but so that was a fun show I watched recently, and I'm looking forward to season 2 of that, which has not been announced yet. So, but I think it was green. It was they greenlit it, but they haven't announced a date yet. Alrighty.
Well, I'll throw a little
go ahead.
Quick shade to Netflix again, because if Netflix had done The Gilded Age, they would have dropped them all at once and then canceled the show the day after.
I know that it is actually, it's funny. Both Disney Plus and HBO Max don't drop like a whole season. They both do like one a week. For 8 to 10 weeks. I mean, because most of their series are like 8 to 10 episodes, but. It's interesting. Maybe the Netflix model isn't. I don't know. Maybe it's not working. Dropping the whole season at once. It is kind of nice to have it a little spread out, I think.
I mean, I think if they dropped it and then didn't cancel it the next day, it's like it feels to me like they produced this series, they put it out, and then why would we invest our time into something open-ended that we know is canceled? It's like another way they're shooting themselves in the foot. They're like, oh yeah, here's this new show, it's canceled, enjoy. Wait, like
which is funny because back in the day, that's what HBO was really under fire for canceling some cult favorites. I remember when they canceled Deadwood. Some angry and Carnival, because they were right around the same time that they canceled them both, and they both had not really had like any kind of resolution at the end of they did finally make a Deadwood movie like 15 years later or something, which was really great. It was amazing. But yeah,
at least they produced more than one season, though. I mean, I think
that's true.
I think like introducing, what was that one that we were looking at? It was like Archive 8. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. There was like a new spooky show on Netflix, and I went to
Archive 91. Is that?
Oh yeah, that's what it was. Archive 91. And I was like, hey, that looks interesting. And then all of a sudden we were going to research watching it. It's canceled. So yes, Netflix deserves all the shade they're getting and that nice little dip in their stock price that they're suffering from.
Listen to your viewers, Netflix.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. All right. On to the main event. Yes, our main topic tonight is talking about specifically the HBO Max. Went to HBO Max again. We're plugging them a lot today. The HBO Max series, His Dark Materials, which is based on a trilogy of novels, which also got a movie treatment in around, I think it was 2007, that did not go anywhere. It got canceled. They made one movie and canceled it. But now it looks like they are going to complete the trilogy in the series. So yes, we're here to discuss this series. And this series it's dear to my heart. I love like the Lord of the Rings. I mean, I feel like this is kind of the other fantasy trilogy that's kind of like on the opposite spectrum of like Lord of the Rings. And I love Lord of the Rings. It's big, it's epic, it's got a lot of fantastical races of beings in it. It's very much good versus evil, much more, I would say, black and white. Like the good characters are very good and they're fighting very purely evil characters. And it's big and epic with lots of battles, and it's the hero's journey kind of story. Whereas His Dark Materials is a very different kind of fantasy trilogy. It doesn't really take place in fantastical worlds. We'll talk about, there is kind of a multiverse, but it's really taking place more in a world that feels more like our own. The characters are living in the gray area. They are not black and white, good and evil. The characters you think you're going to root for suddenly do something horrible, and the characters that you think you're not going to like suddenly redeem themselves. Like it's definitely more of it's more of like a Game of Thrones light, I think, that way, although it's definitely more family friendly. I was reading that His Dark Materials was actually the first series on HBO Max, like ongoing series, not limited series, that was not rated TVMA. So that's kind of funny. Yeah. So let's see. So what are your thoughts on this kind of being like the other fantasy trilogy? What are your thoughts? I'll start with you, Justin.
I can see that. I feel like His Dark Materials is epic, right? I feel like the scope of the universe and the scope of the story and just the way that it touches on very kind of deep themes and yet is still fun and enjoyable to watch is definitely up there. I think it's not as well known as Lord of the Rings, I would say. And I haven't met quite as many people who've read it as well as watched it, but I've read it multiple times and now watched it. And the HBO Max was the first time that I was like, this is what I experienced when I was reading the stories. And but I would definitely say that if you really enjoy epic stories and something big, then dive in, especially since they're making more seasons.
Well, I have to confess, I have not read the books, which I don't think should come as a huge surprise. Like you've both said, it's not as well known as Lord of the Rings. I think the first book was published in 98 or 97.
1995, so, yeah.
So they're not, terribly old books. They've been published in our lifetime. Mm-hmm. Lord of the Rings, of course, has been around for. We're getting close to the 100-year mark at this point. Yep. But I do remember the movie, and by remember I mean we'll talk about that in a minute. But when I first started watching it, on HBO Max. I had to describe it to my mom because I want her to start watching it. She's doing the Gilded Age right now on another profile. I told her, you should watch this because one, it's like you said, one of the handful of HBO Max shows that doesn't feel like HBO in terms of, yeah, it's pretty tame, not
you could watch
horribly
it with
violent.
your parents.
Yeah. But I described it as, it felt like to me a mixture of the Chronicles of Narnia and the Hunger Games, where you do have a lot of religious themes and overtones, but you also have the obvious big government that is oppressing everyone who does not follow them, by the book. So I think it's a very fitting story to adapt in these modern times because it's sort of how this country and many other countries around the world have been experiencing that sense of are we really a country that has separated our government from our church? Are our leaders really looking out for us, or are they looking out for the people who line their pockets? And that's very much what his Dark Materials feels like, albeit with that wonderful fantasy and whimsy. But I also do love that this does have that gray area because there are definitely characters who I thought, okay, I'm on your side, and then all of a sudden, and I'm sure we'll get into that when we talk about characters, but yeah, like that twist of the knife, and you realize, oh, you're not, you're still kind of a protagonist type character, but oh boy, you just did the exact wrong thing right here. And apart from Lyra and Will, it's those about the only two characters, and maybe Mary at this point, are the only characters who I always look at and I say, these are the characters who are walking the right path, who are trying to do right no matter what. So yeah, it's wonderfully more complex in that regard than Lord of the Rings. And Lord of the Rings, the most complex characters probably are just Frodo and Boromir and Sam, who everyone else
who struggle a little bit with like.
Yeah. Everyone else is just like, yeah, I'm good with a sword or a bow or an axe, or the other hobbits are all like, my heart's in the right place, and I can't possibly do any wrong. So yeah, I love that there's a complexity of the characters in this show.
It's interesting. When I was kind of looking up for this episode, I saw where they said, I can't remember where the interview was from, but apparently at one point Phillip Pullman actually said he doesn't typically read fantasy because he finds it kind of too fantastical, and that he actually sees this trilogy that he wrote as stark realism, not fantasy.
Interesting.
Which I thought was and I totally get it. Like it's fantasy, but it is very, very like grounded in real life things. I mean, there's the fantastical element of the demons. That's pretty awesome and fun. But that's also only like in Lyra's dimension. So, but I would say a lot of it really is very, and when you think about, a lot of people will use fantasy and science fiction to kind of write about real world problems and kind of hide them in this cloak of fantasy. I would say Philip Pullman definitely like really, really put his real world problems forward, which is probably why the books are very controversial and also like probably why they're not quite as well known, because they're very controversial for the religious themes. Yeah, I thought that was interesting that he doesn't consider it a fantasy trilogy. All right, so basically one of the big reasons I wanted to talk about this particular topic, other than the fact that I really love the trilogy, is I think it's a really interesting discussion. This is one of the few instances that I could think of where they started to make this trilogy as a movie trilogy. Probably, I'm sure, it was optioned and greenlit due to like the popularity of Lord of the Rings. And they were trying to basically turn every fantasy epic into a movie trilogy. And so they probably saw this and they're like, oh, this is perfect. Another trilogy. We'll make a big epic movie. But it clearly did not work. And we can discuss that a little further, because they made one movie and then it died. They didn't make the other two. And then they've now, making it into the series, it's clearly like getting, it's working much better. It's much more critically acclaimed. And they're going to finish it, and I think they're filming the third season right now, or maybe they finished, but it looked like they think it's supposed to come out before the end of this year, but we'll see. So I just think it's an interesting discussion, because I don't necessarily think that it couldn't have worked as a movie trilogy. I mean, they're fairly short books. They could have fit them each into a movie, but what was it that made the movie not work but makes the series work? I'll start with you first this time, bud.
Well, I literally just decided to look up what studio produced The Golden Compass, and it is New Line Cinema, which did The Lord of the Rings, along with Peter Jackson's Wingnut films, of course. But I find that funny that that New Line, tried to strike gold again and clearly did not this time around. I saw the movie in 2007 in the theater, and when I started watching the show, I just didn't remember anything from the movie. All I could remember from the movie was that Daniel Craig was Lord Asriel, and the only reason I remembered the name of the character is because that's a cool name. And I remember that Nicole Kidman and Eva Green were in the movie, and it had a polar bear. That's all I remember from the movie. It just, and looking at it back up on IMDb, it was like, wait, Ian McKellen was the voice of Yorick in the movie, and Christopher Lee is, one of the Magisterium, elite. How could I forget that Christopher Lee was in a movie at all? That's how you know that a movie has failed, is if I don't remember one of my favorite actors is even in it. It just didn't, hit the same way that Lord of the Rings did, or even Harry Potter the first time I saw it. So I think a part of that is because I don't know how much closer the show has been to adapting the books than the movie was, but one of the things that drew me into the show much more quickly was realizing that there were going to be elements of it that played out in what appeared to be a representation of the real world. And I was like, I don't remember this in the movie at all. And I know that wasn't in the movie. And so my thought was, and it took place in a modern version of our world, with cell phones. And it's like, wait a minute, this book was published in, the 90s. Clearly, when Philip Pullman wrote it, he, even if he had conceived of, of a modern world that had stuff like cell phones, it's like, it brought it into a modern context for me, which the movie didn't, because the movie takes place exclusively in Lyra's world, which is sort of this weird steampunk world, which again I should love, but I think a lot of other movies were just sort of taking that in a better direction. If I can't remember it, then it's just not. It's not worth watching again if I can't remember almost anything of it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I felt like I remember getting excited, also caught up. I was, I'm a big fan of the Lord of the Rings movies, and having read the books, I was excited for the movie, especially with the cast. And I remember going into kind of the release in 2007, there was a lot of this like negative press because the books and the themes of the books do deal with faith and like those religious themes and kind of how that affects the world. And
they're definitely not in favor of like religion running things.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's it's interesting because the magisterium is that kind of totalitarian, like religious system. But I felt like the movie tried to defang that aspect of it. And so, you know, in the show, you feel the power of the magisterium, right? Like they show you, like, just by the set dressing and the cinematography of the magisterium shots, you get this sense of how impressive and powerful this organization is, right? And how powerful these men are, right, in this world. And then all of the other characters from the, you know, from the gypsies to, you know, like the university kids and everyone, are just come to life in the show in a way that they were completely flat and one-dimensional in the movie. And I felt like they just took the danger away. The danger was Miss Coulter in the movie, and that was it. And in the show, it's the whole magisterium. And you don't really know, like, really where Miss Coulter lies at this point in the show. We've seen her act counter to what it would seem her main goals are. And it's really fun to watch.
I guess we should have done like a spoiler warning for this. We usually
everyone who's watching this should know at this point.
In the third book or season, since the third season, we won't spoil the third book, but spoilers of the first two seasons may be in here.
Fair enough. I hope I didn't get too detailed there.
No, you're good.
I felt like the movie was completely forgettable. You're absolutely right to have forgotten it, Ben, because I was like so wanting to root the characters that were good. They were in the movie for minutes, and the characters that were supposed to be carrying the show were very flat and hard to follow, and the show is just much more enjoyable and much closer to the books. With the modern world and the subtle knife and kind of where we're going. It'll be really fun to talk to you after the third episode, Ben.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. I also feel like in them basically trying to make it uncontroversial, they basically killed the heart of the story. Because I feel like Philip Pullman said, his books are stark realism. They're not fantasy. So if you try to take the realism out to make it just a fantasy movie, there's not much substance to work with. I feel like it's like how in school sometimes they teach such a sanitized version of history that makes it super boring, and so nobody likes history like in school. But then when you grow up and you start reading history books, you're like, wow, this is so fascinating, or at least for me. But wow, this is so fascinating. I feel like Lord of the Rings really lucked out in that they were the first big fantasy epic that was super successful. So Peter Jackson actually, I think, got to really like do a lot of stuff like on his terms. I've read that the production of The Golden Compass, they had a couple director changes. I think there was one director, and then he left and they went to another one, and then the first one ended up coming back. But basically they've all said that the producers were like really, really controlling everything they did, and they made all these decisions that totally went against what the directors were wanting to do artistically. They cut out the entire end, like the whole ending part with Lord Asriel, like splitting Roger from his demon, to open up the portal. Like that was all out of the first movie, because they're like, oh, we're gonna put it in at the beginning of the next movie. We don't want to end on a down note, But then it's like there's nothing that really happens other than Yorick fights the other bear to get back. That's really like, that's your climax. Like that's such a small part of the story. So
I know it's funny you bring that up, how they cut the downer ending, because we talked in the Lord of the Rings episode about how, Peter Jackson kind of shuffled a lot of events, particularly in the second two movies.
Mhm.
And again, you're right. He lucked out, I think, in the sense that when New Line committed to doing Lord of the Rings, it wasn't we'll see how the first one goes and then, green light them as they go. They were all in for the whole thing. And it sounds like they weren't for this. Obviously they weren't. If they'd been all in, we'd have a trilogy.
No, they seem to have a very specific idea of, this cute little family fantasy. I don't know.
Isn't that kind of what happened to The Hobbit too? Was that New Line kind of really just came in heavy-handed, and it changed the dynamic of, let's make this one book into 4 movies, and here's how you're going to do it, Mr. Jackson, and that was not the same trilogy or quadrilogy, I guess.
It was 3.
Oh, was it 3? Okay,
it was. Feels like 4.
Yeah, it felt like 5 movies.
Whereas Lord of the Rings, as something that was led from the heart, right, of the story, and driven with the passion of the love of the tale, like, it shines through. And I think that you can see that in this new show, that the producers and the director and the artistic team were like, all right, we need to keep the core, we need to keep the heart of the story. And while it's definitely not to the book, right, the adaptation is far more faithful, in my opinion, than the movie was.
Yeah, really, most of the changes I would say they made from the book to the His Dark Materials series actually add more weight and more they kind of resonate more. A big change they made is in the book, the boy that Lyra finds, who's been separated from his demon, who's ends up dying, is just kind of a random boy that she finds. And then in the show, they had that be was it Billy Costa or Tony? I can't remember which one was the little boy. Billy Costa? I
believe it was Billy. Yeah.
Yeah, there's Billy, I think, and Tony. Tony was the older one, right?
Yep.
In the show, they have it, be Billy Costa that they find separated, and so you see, you've been on this journey with his family since he was taken, trying to find him, and then and it's really emotional and really sad. And so that, I feel like the changes they're making in the show are much more to make it resonate more. But they're really keeping all the really important kind of heart of the story intact. And Lyra is I would say the Lyra in the movie looks more like how they describe her in the books, but Daphne Keane in the show plays her she gets the character, because Lyra is definitely much more scrappy and goes into everything head first. And yeah, she definitely gets the character. All right. So on that note, themes and characters that resonate with you in this show, because I think, a beautiful thing about this series being made right now is, I think, like Ben said earlier, it really, really, there's a lot of themes in this show that really resonate with where the world is right now. And I think, yeah, so they picked a great time to try making this into a series again. So I'll start with you first this time, Dustin. What are some themes or characters in this series that resonate with you?
Well, I definitely think, we have an authoritarian problem in the world right now, where a lot of people are identifying with wanting or thinking they want strong leaders or authoritarian patterns. And it is really interesting to see that emerge so clearly in this show. right, as a commentary, kind of up against the backdrop of the world, the oppressive power of the magisterium, and kind of how it sees the world, and in this case the universe, right, in this story. And like it's been challenging, I think, for a lot of us who grew up in like the 80s and the 90s, right? Like looking at our world right now, going like, whoa, what is everybody like drinking? And it's like the way that people are behaving is so different from the world that we came up in. And I think this show really takes that head on, in the context of the story in the book, but it draws those parallels of power and corruption and oppression, and also the people that are trying to fight that or free themselves from that, or are outside of that, right, just by virtue of who they are. um like it's really interesting to me, and this is a mild spoiler warning, that Will gets to meet his father, right, the shaman, in the second episode. And you get to see kind of the contrast between the boy from our modern world and his father, who kind of got lost in this other world, and the things that he learned. And it's a really fun part, kind of in the end of the second season, to see those things come together. Very human, very great characters in this show. I think the actor, I had his name handy, who played Will.
Amir Wilson.
Amir does a really good job, I think, channeling kind of and acting the stress of being this kid kind of thrown in this situation where he's like in way over his head, and I think a lot of us are feeling overwhelmed in the world right now, and so it's really fun to kind of travel the road with these characters who are routinely in over their head, and then persevering and overcoming. And it's another good aspect of the story I really like.
I like that you brought up Will. I think he's a great foil to Lyra because, Lyra is obviously constantly in over her head, but she also has a much better understanding of what she's getting herself into and is constantly pushing Will and herself to carry on because she knows even more so than he does what exactly is at stake. So I love the relationship between those two and how that developed in the second season. Um, one thing I just one theme that I absolutely loathe, but I realize is necessary in a lot of shows and movies like this. I hate it when we get into like classism. I hate that the magisterium is almost exclusively going after the Egyptian children. Oh, because they're all, these low class, poor traveling families. No one's going to, miss them. It doesn't matter if anything bad happens to them. Oh, that just grinds my gears so much. And it's so hard to, there in the real world, you have Boreal, who's, traveling between the worlds, and he has his his henchmen in our world. And like they're just like, oh, it's so cool that we're working for this guy, and I'm just sitting there yelling, you're working for a fascist, dudes. Like the people he's working for, like, yeah, it's absolute fascism. And it oh, I can't stand. They're great. It's what makes it great. If you can't stand a villain because they're too relatable to what you're seeing in the real world.
Yeah.
You know it's big mainstream Marvel movies and James Bond movies, it's like we love those villains because they're so goofy and so over the top, and we can kind of understand their goals even though they're, not they're going about it the wrong way. But yeah, what the Magisterium is doing is just like, oh God, I hate it. I hate it so much. It, I both love and hate getting angry like this at at a story, because it's starkly real.
Well, yeah, I mean, while we're filming this episode, there's war, overseas in Ukraine, and there's evidence, at least from what we can see in our limited fog of war, of war crimes against children. And it's really always broke my heart that humans can cut themselves off enough from their humanity to where they can do those things to kids, right? Whether it's the fantastical magisterium, or the more realistic and kind of heavy armies of Russia and Ukraine, right? It's like how does that happen, right? And I think these stories are really important because it happens again and again throughout our history, that people start dehumanizing others to the point to where they don't think twice about committing atrocities against them. And that's kind of like the whole relationship with the demon, and with these children, and then what the magisterium is trying to do is on par with the greatest atrocity.
But they're separating kids from their demons for their good. It's to help them.
Oh yes, there's
then
always
they won't feel
good.
pain. They won't feel pain growing up. They won't be confused.
Indeed.
Oh, you brought up Ukraine, because my first thought when I was watching it was, taking the kids, was the separation of families at the U.S.-Mexican border. It's like, oh man, I don't understand how anyone can feel they are morally in the right when they are taking children, separating families. It boggles my mind.
Yeah. I think if they were forced to experience it firsthand, maybe there would be a breakthrough. But I think that certain people in power have just managed to isolate themselves into their own realities, their own bubbles, right?
Well, that's kind of, yeah, the Ben was talking about, kind of the theme he doesn't like, but is necessary in a lot of stories of like the classism. It's like that classism makes it really easy to dehumanize. Like they go after the people they can dehumanize.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, these kids have horrible lives anyway, right? So we're going to take them, and then they'll, it's just it's definitely like the dehumanization. I'm thinking like, oh, because they live a different lifestyle than me. Well, that's not a life worth living. So it's,
devalue, right? Like, because a poor person's struggling, right? Somehow they don't have the same economic value or power or usefulness as someone else. And it's something that we've been fighting as humans since, we crawled out of our caves, and the argument between, elites and the poor will continue on. Hopefully we'll figure it out.
And I find it, like, I think it's really fascinating, the scene where Lyra is about to be kind of cut with the machine, and her mom, Mrs. Coulter, steps in and stops them, but then she's trying to explain to Lyra that, oh, it's this great thing we're doing for the kids. It's going to help them. And Lyra's like, well, it's going to help them. Why did you stop them? Well, no, it's not good to happen to you, but, it's like, well, not my child, but
it's kind of like
better off.
Yeah. It's kind of like hampering public schools and sending your kid to private schools. I won't name names, but there's lots of people in power that are acting as fascists, who are acting with that same hypocrisy as Miss Coulter did in the show, of wanting to both have the power and be part of that in group, but still having to protect your own, essentially, from your own evil.
Yeah.
I know, light subjects for the Sunday night.
Yeah. Another great scene, I thought, and is where Boreal first brings Mrs. Coulter over to our world and explains to her, our world is repressed in a complete is oppressed in a completely different way, and that's consumerism. It's like, oh yeah, we here in the United States, we don't see the grim realities of war because we haven't been attacked, in years, but we are slowly eating ourselves away from the inside because, and it's weird to talk about corporate greed at a time when we currently have uh, a state government trying to shut down a major corporation because that corporation is actually taking a stance that the right stance, and that I'm talking about Disney right now.
Yeah.
It's like for the first time, you've got the conservative side saying, well, we can't let the corporation do that, and it's like, well, isn't that what you have been toting this whole time? Is that the free market? It's like free market as long as they're doing what you say.
Yeah, and it'll keep changing, right? Because it's at this point, it's whatever path leads them to power is the one they're trying to take. And that's, you look at the magisterium and you look at how they handle like the changeover of power, over those 2 episodes, and how there's just the pressure and intense like rivalry between the leaders. Like we see that the same thing happening in our politics right now, right? Like the corrupt charismatic and powerful people, but they all really just despise each other. And the sad thing is that over time they'll just start ripping themselves and our country apart, which is the thing we're all trying to fight against right now. An interesting time to be alive.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also interesting how you have the character of Lord Asriel, who is like anti-magisterium, but so you're thinking he's like the person you want to root for, but then he's like, he's anti-magisterium, but he kind of wants, a different kind of authoritarianism, like almost too much. Yeah. Like, he claims to be against them and hate what they stand for, but then he's basically doing the same thing. He, splits a child from his demon for his own purposes, to try to create a hole to go into another dimension. So
yeah, it's a whole,
like that resonates in our world too. The people that are anti this, but then they're doing something else like harmful, It
makes you wonder if everyone just wants to be king, right? If it's like, no matter who you are, on what side of the spectrum you are, it seems like enough power eventually sends people sideways, right? Once they've hit a certain level of power, like Lord Asriel, thought nothing of what he did. It was just one stepping stone to his ambition in the books. And this is where I have to hold back, because the 3rd book is really interesting in kind of the direction it takes from here. And in fact, it's much more controversial in a lot of ways than the first 2 books, in kind of the opinions and assertions it takes. And I'm really interested to see how HBO handles that, because do they handle it head on? We'll see. Do they try to soften it? Do they make the same mistake as the movie and try to kind of cut out some of the more controversial notes, or do they lean into it? I don't know. It's HBO. They'll probably lean into it.
Probably. Yeah, I think actually we might save the discussion on the multiverse in this series for when we do the spoiler cast for season 3, because I feel like the multiverse plays into season 3 a little bit more.
And at that point,
it's funny that we have 2.
I was just going to say we have Doctor Strange coming out, so we'll have a lot of multiverse discussion.
And maybe by then, all 3 of us will also maybe had a chance to see Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah,
because that's not it. It's the year of the multiverse, apparently.
Apparently. We're all like, there must be a better universe than this one. No.
Yeah, where did ours go sideways? Let's get back on track.
That's another kind of interesting thing in the series is just the Sitagazi, the kind of in between world with the specters. That's a pretty creepy, interesting, where they, kill all the adults, so it's a world of children. I feel like that's a whole nother I don't know.
It's Lord of the Flies all over again.
I know. All right, so now that we've talked a lot about the dark, deep, heavy subjects in this series, of which there are many, let's talk about some of the fun moments or casting choices you liked or didn't like, or or just kind of choices within the show. What are some of the just things you liked, things you thought were fun, things you thought were ridiculous? I'm gonna start with you this time, Ben.
Well, when I looked at this topic, really I latched immediately onto casting choices, and one person stood out, and that is Ruth Wilson as Mrs. Coulter. Just because you talk about HBO leaning into the heavy-handed stuff. Ruth Wilson leans into that character perfectly without going over the top, because there are moments where, in the hands of another actor, it could have gone horribly wrong. These moments where she taps into the creature inside of her, and it's genuinely frightening. And it could have come off as completely ridiculous. But no, she handled it in the most professional way possible. I think she's just the most complex character in the show, because she's the character who you're actively most of the time rooting against, but then she'll make a choice that you say, oh, I didn't expect that. Like when she gives Lee Scoresby the key to escape from the prison. I still think this is an act of evil, but I also got to cheer her on a little bit when she poisons Boreal, because, it makes it villains, dispatching each other, killing off each other makes the job of the heroes so much easier. So you got to love when a villain, even if it's for their own dark purposes, is able to do something like that. So yeah, her character is it's fascinating. Though at this point, I'm still absolutely livid with her, because, now she's got Lyra in a box, and that, again, she's stifling the journey of the hero, even though she thinks she's doing the right thing.
I think
it's fascinating.
Her kind of war within herself, of her like lust and want for power, kind of juxtaposing against her motherhood, that she, basically, she pushed her child away. She didn't want anything to do with her. She wanted power. But her kind of journey throughout the story of kind of finding her moments of like a mother's love is very, and it's going to be really, it's going to be there's going to be some amazing stuff for Ruth Wilson in the third season, whichever, I don't know how much they'll deviate from the book, but there's still, it's still a pretty, there's a lot of very interesting character arc left for her. So
I was very impressed.
Maybe Emmys.
Yeah, maybe Emmys. I was very impressed with Ruth's performance. I think she did an amazing job, and the way that she navigated that subtlety and almost like the psychosis of that character, it's just phenomenal. The one I'm keen to talk about, though, is Lee Scoresby. I'm interested in your thoughts, Ben, of Lin-Manuel in this show versus some of the other actors, since he's hot topic right now, coming off of his massive success with Encanto. What did you think about him as the cowboy?
He was a delight from the start. I have to retract a previous statement. He's also one of the characters that I'm always actively rooting for, because he's the mistakes he makes are he's the Han Solo of this show. He'll make those stupid kind of rogue mistakes of like, oh no, like, maybe his balloon isn't functioning quite the way it should. Ah, darn it, they told me they fixed it. But he's apart from the first few moments of meeting him, where he's definitely thinking of himself and what he wants, he very, very quickly latches onto Lyra and realizes that there is so much more important than, we don't even really know what it is that he was after to begin with. It's as unimportant to us as it becomes to him, and I think that's just a lovely way for his character to go. And I was devastated that he was tragically killed off in that final episode of season 2, and that whole episode was like, for all the wonderful moments in that episode, was like, oh man, this is such a downer. This is more of a downer than the Two Towers.
Ooh.
I know. This poor little rabbit. Like, don't go before. He's like, don't go before I do.
Hester, yeah. And they did that scene so well in season 2 with when they're fighting, and just absolutely utterly heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking in the books too, Ben, just so you know. It's like, you're just like, why is this happening? This should not be happening.
And I can't remember in the show. I know in the book, because I actually have re-listened to the books more recently than I watched the show. But I can't remember in this show, does John Perry actually do the thing that he said he was gonna? Because I know in the books he doesn't. In the books, he like breaks the promise that he makes to Lee Scoresby.
Yeah, I don't think they've carried that out quite the same way in the show. I think I recall in the show that at least he's trying. The way they handle that end meeting in the books is actually completely deviates from, not completely, but the meeting between Lee Scoresby and, I'm sorry, what was
John Perry.
Yeah, John Perry. Thank you.
Or Stanislaus Grumman, John Perry.
Stanislaus Grumman, John Perry, Will's dad, same guy. In the books, there's more involvement with the witches and some other things that happen differently from the movie. But I really like the way that the movie characterized John Perry. Actually was more approachable than the books in a lot of ways. In the books, this very strange person, that character.
That's actually one casting choice I wanted to, because it's kind of, it's a smaller part. He's really just kind of in, the latter half of season 2, but Andrew Scott's portrayal of John Perry, I feel like he really gave that character way more resonance than he might have had. And I think the only time I've really seen, I feel like I've seen that actor here and there, and sometimes he plays kind of really goofy characters. I know he was in, I think he was in like the Sherlock BBC series, right? Wasn't he Moriarty in that? But I felt like he just created a really believable, like grounded character. Like you believe this man has been wandering these other dimensions for like ages, and yeah, I feel like he made more of that role than it could have been. And I think that's why you feel like they did better with it because he was just kind of weird in the book. And in the book, it's weird because he meets real Will, but then right away he ends up getting like killed by a random witch who basically like shoots him through the heart because he wouldn't like be her lover or something.
Yeah,
and then
it was lover scorn.
Like, so it's really
book
weird.
Spoilers. Yeah.
The witches have a really different role in, I would say, the show, especially when they get into season 2. In the show, they seem to be setting up some kind of a war between the witches and the magisterium, which is not something the witches are kind of much more free agents, I feel like, in the books. They're not like quite so cohesive, but
Yeah, there's some persecution in the books, but it's kind of like the same type of persecution of just the general persecution of the other, right? If you're
yeah,
not magisterium, you are the other, right?
yeah,
And you must be
yeah.
punished, and they get wrapped up in that, just like the Egyptians, right?
There are witches that get like Mrs. Coulter does torture the witch for information in the book, and there's the other one that kind of gets fed to the specter. And Serafina Pekkala is pretty active in the books.
Very much so.
But yeah, there's definitely not so much the like them coming together to war against the magisterium in the book. So I'm curious how that's going to play out in season 3, because they kind of set that up in the show.
And now we have angels, so that's gonna make this story more interesting.
Also, I kind of already shouted out to Daphne Keane. She did an amazing job as Lyra too.
Yeah, I'm glad that she has actually fairly quickly gotten a big role to sink her teeth into since Logan, because that could have been it for her. That could have been her one moment in the spotlight. But I'm glad that someone had the good sense to cast her in something else this big.
She's talented. I look forward to seeing her acting career blossom if she can survive and navigate, being a child actor in Hollywood. She'll go really far. And I think, like, her paired up against Ruth too, like, you could see in the moments in the scenes between like her and her mother, just so much extra chemistry, subtlety, and complexity to the acting. It was so much fun to watch. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also it's cool that her dad is in the show, playing Cardinal McPhail. And it's like they are on the opposite end of the spectrum on the show, but in reality, he's probably, there on the set coaching her and encouraging her. And, I think that's really cool to have family on the set or, in the show, even if you're hardly working with them in any, they don't have any scenes together as far as I can remember. So
I don't think they have. Apparently, really also cool. James McAvoy and his ex-wife are both in the series, although I don't think they had any scenes together either. But
huh.
He apparently, I think it's the lady who plays Ma Costa is his ex-wife.
Oh,
I read that in the trivia. Anne Marie Duff.
Anne Marie Duff.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm I have a soft spot for James McAvoy, so I've always really I like the effort he puts into every role. Like he takes every role seriously. And we were talking about like Glass earlier. I didn't see Glass, but when he was working with M. Night during Split, I have mixed feelings with Split, but James' performance in that was phenomenal. I mean, the work he did to transition between personalities like that on camera without missing a beat is hard work. I mean, both of like to do that well would just take a lot of practice. And he brings that to every role I've ever seen him in. And as Azrael, he definitely captured he's the kind hero that I want to follow. Oh wait, this guy isn't like so nice after all. Really well. So good job, James. I can still keep you high in my fanboydom.
It's cool to see him also come full circle with the fantasy series, since he was Mr. Tumnus when I don't think it was either Disney. I think it was Disney when they first launched the Chronicles of Narnia live action series.
I know, that's funny. It's funny he's in both because a lot of people kind of consider Chronicles of Narnia and his Dark Materials to be like, I don't know, like kind of antitheses of each other. Like, because Chronicles of Narnia is like the super pro Christian like fantasy, and then his Dark Materials is like the atheist fantasy.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. All right. Well, one final fun question to ask everybody. What would your demon be? Or what do you think your demon would be?
I had to settle because I unfortunately have to think realistically. So I settled on, we'll just say generic bird, because in my mind, I have a much greater connection to fish and to, the amazing creatures that you find in the ocean. But, if I were to exist in the world of his Dark Materials, my demon couldn't be a fish. I don't have gills. That would make no sense. It'd be a giant shark just flopping beside me.
Yeah, I guess no, they can't really have fish demons, can they?
But no, there's
Does anybody have a fish demon? Does that work?
Yeah, in the book, there's a sailor who has demons a dolphin.
Oh.
Devil is a dolphin.
So you would need to have a water.
He can't live on land. He's basically at sea all the time, or like we're next to the sea.
So that's why the witches have bird demons, because they all have bird demons, right? Because they have to be able to fly, and they can separate from there.
Well, right. And in the books, they touch on it really lightly. Like, why do the witches, are they able to separate from their demons? And in the books, there's a rite of passage to become a witch that involves something that causes them to be able to kind of keep but be separate from their demons. I thought about this too. Funny enough, also a bird, but I was a little more specific, Ben. I was thinking I would like an owl, like a great owl. I find a lot of affinity to, the owl, apex predator. Although I'm probably not anything close to an apex predator in my life, but also just very wise, quiet, something I like. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like mine would be, I don't know. Maybe I feel like mine would be something that likes to, I don't know, kind of be quiet and hang out in dark places. I don't know. I was thinking maybe I could keep with the bird theme and go with like a bat or something, but I feel like maybe, I don't know, maybe something like a wolf. Yeah. Or maybe a panda bear.
Wolf, panda bear.
I know.
Wolf, panda bear.
I feel like I would have a demon that would, so the demons like constantly can change form, I think, up until they like hit puberty, right? So I would probably have a demon that was like just constantly changing, like as long as it could.
Yeah, like never settle, never grow up.
I think I'd probably like go with wolf.
All right.
Awesome.
You can come visit me at the coast, since I'll be apparently stuck there.
Been tied to the water till the end of time. That would
definitely
be really weird to have that constraint, though. Like, you have this part of yourself that anchors you to the sea or anchors you to like your job. Like, it was interesting that all the magisterium people had like spiders and like snakes and like things that were very, very like creepy, crawly, sneaky.
But it's fitting, because that's like they want to hide their true nature, so they have something they can hide.
Yeah.
And it's, like being anchored to the sea. I mean, aren't there people who are like anchored to the sea? Like they don't do well on land. They all, they want to be on boats. So it kind of makes sense. You find the thing that works for you, I guess.
True. It's either that or I construct a portable tank.
You could do that too. And like one of those like beer hats, but like a fishbowl hat.
There's Ben walking his tank dolphin again.
I love it. All right, Dustin, do you have any final thoughts about His Dark Materials you would like to share?
Thank you to Philip Pullman for writing the books, and taking the risk to write a story. I mean, even in the 90s, that takes on religion and takes on authoritarianism and takes on some pretty major themes.
And a children's book at that.
Yeah, in a young reader's kind of package,
or a
in
young
a coming of age story. Yeah, it's, thank you, Phil, for writing it, and thank you, BBC, for producing a good show. Thank you for actually doing it right, because why do we love movies and TV? Because it takes us to those places, right? And it takes us out of our world. And when you have such a powerful trilogy of books, to kind of go that movie New Line route where they really were stripping out the story and trying to kind of have their cake and eat it too, just is not the way. Give us the story, give us the grit, give us the challenge. That's what we're showing up for, so thank you all for this wonderful series.
All right, Ben, your final thoughts.
On top of what Dustin has already said, I would just like to see HBO tackle more stuff like this, where we don't have to say, oh, you may not want to watch this because it's HBO. It's going to have too much violence, too much sex, and there's violence in this show, but it's more dramatic than it is graphic. I certainly would not recommend this as a young children's show, but this is definitely a show that that a younger audience can approach on HBO. And I think as much as I bemoan the rise of streaming services, they are in terms of television, maybe not necessarily quite as much in film, but in terms of television, they're the ones that are tackling this kind of content more than the networks are at this point. So I hope that HBO and Apple will continue to push shows, across for all ages that are making us question, the world we live in and our place in it. There's definitely a place for, the network popcorn stuff. I'll always love like Castle, anything Nathan Fillion does, just the fun kind of TV stuff. But give me a His Dark Materials. Give me something that I love, but that I also am literally just fuming at because I see so much of our world in it, and I'm just glad that someone is out there willing to point fingers and say, hey, this is entertainment, but it's also, it is going to make you want to think, oh man, maybe there's something that art can do to change the world for the better.
I think I just want to reiterate, which I feel like I probably said on a previous episode too, but I think one of the lessons we can learn here is that if you're going to go to all the trouble to adapt a beloved novel or series of novels for television or film, just stick to it, like stick to the story, which I think they're doing much better of doing now versus like even 10 years ago. I think they're doing a lot better like being true to the source material. But please just be true to the source material. That's why we loved it in the first place. That's why we want to watch it. Don't try to be like, oh well, people will like it better if we make it like cutesy and fun, and yeah. So that's what I want to reiterate. Just if you're gonna adapt novels, stay true to the novel, please.
Can I add an asterisk to that?
Yes.
I will make exceptions for a lot of the public domain stuff that has been adapted a billion times, like Frankenstein and Dracula. I mean, obviously, yes, stick to, the characters, but I don't mind if if it's been adapted a billion times, if you want to put your own weird spin on it and set it, in the distant future, or whatever, because we can only watch Mary Shelley's Frankenstein so many times.
No, you make a good point. Definitely, if it's something that's been adapted like multiple times, or even if you just are like, I'm gonna, I decided I'm gonna make His Dark Materials the like the musical comedy version. I mean, maybe somebody could do that well. I don't know, but it's one thing if you're kind of trying to go with a different like kind of theme, but if you're trying to supposedly adapt a source material, and you're calling it that, and you're like, this is an adaptation of this book, especially if it's like the first time the book's been adapted into a movie. Like, just stay, and you can make little changes. Like, little changes are okay, but stay true to like the heart of the story. Don't don't dumb it down. I guess is what I'm saying.
Little changes made Lord of the Rings what it is, and we love it for that.
Yep.
Yeah, just don't dumb it down.
Yep. Well, in 300 years, when they have the steampunk musical version of His Dark Materials, they can dig this out. And
yeah.
All right. I did look up a little trivia question. So we do get to do trivia. So we Ben's first time he gets to answer a trivia question.
All right, I'm here for
he could get an honorary point. All right, so our trivia question is, in an article I was looking at from 2017, some various people were asking Philip Pullman questions about his books, and someone asked him what his demon is, and he answered it. So what do you think Philip Pullman's demon is? Is it A, a raven, B, a badger, C, an owl, or D, a meerkat?
I'm gonna go with a badger. Total guess.
Yeah, also total guess, but I'm gonna say owl just because I like owls, and I want to believe that Philip would like owls too.
All right, Ben's going with badger. Dustin is going with owl, and I'm sorry to say neither of you are on the board.
Darn.
The correct answer is A, a raven.
A raven.
Of
course a writer would choose a raven.
Yep.
Thanks for hosting, Sarah.
What?
Thanks for hosting.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah. So that concludes episode 43 of the Sunday Matinee. Our discussion about His Dark Materials seasons 1 and 2. I am planning to do another episode, a spoiler cast, once season 3 comes out, whenever that happens. Maybe by the end of this year. Right now, they're thinking it will be out by the end of this year, but we'll see. All right. And Ben, were there any news items we needed to include before signing off?
No, nothing really. Okay. Nothing that we haven't discussed already. I mean, obviously you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ I believe it's Truth in Film, and on Twitter at Sunday_matinee. And if you're watching this, you clearly found us on YouTube. So good for you.
All right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining me on my first guest hosting experience. It's been a pleasure. It was fun.
Thank you, Sarah.
And yes, we hope to see you all again next time. Till then, farewell.